Okay. Well, it's great to be here. And what we're going to do tonight is we're going to do a little bit of just a few different things, but we're going to start with some introductions so that you kind of know a little bit about who we are. And My name is Josh Sofair. This is Annette. We are married. We live in Los Angeles, and we serve full time as missionaries with an organization called Jews for Jesus. So we're Jewish. We believe in Jesus as the Messiah, and so we are in a organization that is kind of built around communicating that message to other Jewish people. And what we try and do is provide a way for Jewish people, every Jewish person around the world, to hear and engage with the gospel in a way that makes sense and is relevant to them. That's what we're all about. That's kind of what we do. So we're going to talk about this a bit over the next couple of days. We've been to Joshua now a handful of times. Net's got a long history with Hume, and so we'll talk to you, and um, we will also you'll see, you're going to see us again in a couple of months down in Los Angeles, because you're going to come and serve with us and do some outreach when you're down there. So it'll be fun to kind of get to know each other. So can you want to start with just a little bit of introduction, a little story, and then I'll get the PowerPoint up.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I go back.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you start with yours?
Okay. Okay. So yeah. So Josh says I have a history with Jews for Jesus. I do have a history with Jews for Jesus and with Hume Lake. I grew up in Fresno. My maiden name is Morgenstern. And my family had a cabin up here at Hume Lake when I was growing up. My grandparents built one of the earliest cabins that was up here at Hume Lake. So yeah, but my family actually so my dad's side of the family is Jewish, and his family were refugees from Vienna, Austria, from the Holocaust. And they came, eventually, they settled in the Central Valley because my great uncle and his wife were sponsored by the Jewish community of Fresno to come to the United States. And they actually came out of a refugee camp for Jewish refugees in Shanghai, China. So, yeah, so the Jewish community of Fresno sponsored them to come, and then my grandparents, who had first come to the East Coast, came out also to Fresno to live near their brother and sister-in-law. And, they only spoke German at the time, so, they were set up with a business by the Jewish community of recycling feed and seed sacks for the farmers in the Central Valley. So they would travel around all the little farm towns outside of Fresno, and, on one of those trips out to Reedley, my, grandfather, Mr. Morgenstern, Doctor Morgenstern, actually, um, met a German-speaking Mennonite farmer who started to share the Lord with him, um, and and then, in German, actually. And, over the course of several times of their meeting and studying the scripture together and arguing over who the Messiah was supposed to be, my grandfather became convinced that Jesus was indeed the Messiah, the promised Messiah for the Jewish people. And at that point, he came to faith in Jesus, and so did my grandma, and eventually his brother and sister-in-law as well. So that little part of our family became believers, but in those days in the 1940s, the idea, if you were Jewish and you put your faith in Jesus, you were now a Christian. You had converted and you were no longer Jewish. You were a Christian. So that was the kind of background that my dad grew up with, in going to a Presbyterian church. And he married my mom, who grew up in a Baptist church. And it wasn't until I was a little kid that my dad came in contact with these people who called themselves Jews for Jesus. And they said to him, Jim Morgenstern, that sounds pretty Jewish to us, And they said to him, believing in Jesus is actually a Jewish thing, and you don't stop being Jewish because you believe in Jesus. We'll explain that a little bit later. And so for me, then, kind of growing up from that point on, we reincorporated a lot of our Jewish traditions into our family life. So we celebrated Hanukkah and Christmas. Passover and Easter. And as I was growing up, we were learning about Jesus, who was this Jewish guy who lived in Israel. All his disciples were Jewish, and it always made sense to me that if you were Jewish, you could follow Jesus as Messiah. So that's the kind of background I grew up with. I decided to study music in college, and I ended up going to Biola, and I graduated from there with a degree in music. But one of the reasons I was really interested in going there was to study the 30 units of Bible, and I loved that. That was one of my favorite things about being at Biola, was all of that good Bible background. But in those years, actually, I connected with the Los Angeles branch of Jews for Jesus and volunteered all through my college years, with them, and kind of felt more and more connected to my Jewish roots, and also to wanting, having a vision to reach my Jewish people with the gospel. And so after college, I toured around. They used to have a national touring team, and so oh, in the ministry stuff, yeah. So, but that's kinda how that's a little bit of my testimony. When I was 12, 13 years old, that was when I started to think about, "Is this really what I believe, or is this just my parents' belief?" And, began to think that through, and the ideas of, like, is there a God, or is life just all random and this is just all by chance? And even at that age, I realized life is way too meaningful just to be completely by chance. And I just thought you have to have more faith to believe that there's not a God than that there is one. And in those years, my faith really began to cement itself, and I asked to be baptized at that age. And then part of the reason I wanted to be baptized was I was wanted to commit myself to sharing the gospel with Jewish people, not just Jewish people, with everybody. So that's a little bit of my background and my testimony. And I was on staff a little bit at Hume. I used to be on winter weekend staff, because every weekend they'd ship a group of kids up from Fresno to serve all of the weekend retreats. So used to work on winter weekend staff, and then also I was like the fill-in staff at the end of the summer one year too. So I'm a little bit of a Hume alumni, a little bit of a Hume camper, and a lot of time at the cabin and hiking all around Hume. So I love it. It's still like home to me. So yes, yeah, you're welcome. Yeah.
And so my story is about as different as you can get. So did not grow up as Christian. Um, did not grow up in a world where I don't think I knew anybody who was a Christian growing up. I knew people who kind of said they were Christian, but they didn't their life wasn't any different than me. So I grew up in the Bay Area, Berkeley, East Bay, um, secular Jewish family. We were not a very religious family, although we did a lot of the holidays, and I had a bar mitzvah and we went to camp and all of that kind of stuff, like Jewish camp. And so, when I graduated high school, um, I, perhaps like some of you, didn't quite feel like I was ready for college and wanted a little bit of a different experience. So a buddy and I traveled. We spent a year, in New Zealand and Australia, just kind of hitchhiking around. You could do that during those days, and so we ended up getting jobs at an apple orchard in New Zealand. We lied about having work visas. I'm sure they knew that we were lying, but they hired us anyway. And so we ended up working there. And it turned out this orchard was owned by Christians and run by Christians, and they would talk about Jesus all the time, and they would, like, talk about, like, Christian music, and I didn't know that Christian music existed. I didn't know that there was such a thing. They went to Bible study, they went to church all the time. So, they would start talking to me about all of these, and they eventually one day said, "So, Josh, what do you believe?" And I said, "Well, I'm Jewish." And they said, "Oh, that's cool. You're Jewish. We've never met anybody Jewish before. Um, so what do you believe?" And I said, "Well, I told you. I mean, I'm Jewish. What that kind of answers it." And they're like, "No, no, no. Do you believe in the Bible? Do you believe in Jesus?" They asked me all these questions, and I just said, "I don't really believe in anything. I'm just Jewish. I mean, just that's like who I am." And that made perfect sense to me. until I said it. And then I thought, well, that's not a very good answer. And so I would then kind of over the next maybe 3 or 4 months, um, I was curious. I don't think I was open. Maybe I was more open than I think, but I was curious about um, how does Jesus work? What does it mean to believe in Jesus? Um, the Bible. And so I would just ask these guys tons of questions. And I thought, to be honest with you, I thought believing in Jesus was the most idiotic thing that anybody could do in their life. I just thought, you gotta be kidding me. But there was something that drew me. And eventually, the thing that really drew me was reading the Bible. And so one of these guys loaned me a Bible, and I could read it in Hebrew, but I didn't really understand the Hebrew so much. But I read it in English for the first time. And the first book in the Bible, which that I read, which is still today maybe my favorite book in the Bible, is the book of Ecclesiastes. And so I read Ecclesiastes and I read all about me. And it just sort of drew me in. And I started reading more and more, eventually read the New Testament. And when I then ventured into the New Testament, I was pretty much I was ready to read a book that was uh against women, a book that hated gay people, a book that was anti-Semitic, because I thought, oh, Christians hate Jews because they killed them. That's kind of what I thought it was a book, and that Christians did all of these other kind of things that I felt like were not great. So then I read the New Testament, and now I'm, like, struck because what I thought was in there, it wasn't. So now I have to reckon with what I thought the Christianity was about and the Bible was about, and what I'm actually reading the Bible, and they don't really line up. So over the next 6 months or so, I'm sort of working through this, end up becoming a believer, getting baptized, coming home, uh, telling my parents that I believed in Jesus as the Messiah and I was now a Christian. They were furious. They were just livid at me. It was the worst thing that I could have done for them. Um, you know, uh, and probably like you guys, I mean, all of my friends growing up, they just partied a lot. And so I felt disconnected from them. And so ended up getting a job. Um, in Lake Tahoe at one of the ski resorts, and so moved up to Tahoe, and, worked at Heavenly Valley and wanted to go to a church, but I didn't know anything about church. I didn't know what the difference between all of the churches were. So I visited a couple and I stayed at the one that had donuts before the service. And that was like the Baptist church, and so I ended up staying there. So then there, I kind of grew in my faith, uh, ended up coming on staff with Juice for Jesus, and so and met Annette. And so, that's just a little bit of our story. I wanted to just show you a couple of pictures, just to kind of about us to, I don't know, just to sort of introduce us. I was gonna start with this one, but this is like all you can already see us, so there's no reason to see like an even bigger picture of us. Oh, it's us. All right. Okay. So Annette talked about the her Jewish family from Vienna. And so you know a little bit about the history of Jewish people in Europe. You know a little bit about the Holocaust, I'm sure. You know a little bit about some of the history. My family's different. So this is a picture that was taken in Rangoon, Burma, and my great great grandfather is the guy in the suit leaning against the building. And so Fair and Company is was a business that they had in Burma in about a 1900 1910. And my family is Jewish from the Middle East. So my family is originally from Iraq, And the story of my family is, if you know the Babylonian exile, right? Jews were taken into exile. And then God said, go back to Jerusalem, rebuild the temple, right? This is Ezra and Nehemiah, all of that. Well, there were some Jews that were like, we like it here. We like built a house. We have a good, we don't want to go back. And they stayed, and they were the disobedient ones. So that's my family. That's where I come from. So, there's been a Jewish community in the Middle East, in Iraq, in Iran, consistently since the Babylonian exile until just in the 20th century. So for 2,500 years, Jewish people have been living in this area, and so my family is part of that. So um, this is just a picture of our family now. I know. So, these are our 2 girls here. This is Eliana and Talia. Eliana is married to the tall guy. Our whole family are all about the same height, if you notice, and then there's the married guy that came in that's kind of bringing he's Patrick, and he's married to Eliana. They live in Portland, Oregon, that's kinda where we were when we were taking these pictures. Talia, the one here on the left, she is, back living in New York City, where she was born and raised, and so she's in grad school right now studying to be a curator in a museum. That's kind of what she wants to do. So she's studying design and curatorial study. So yeah, so that's a bit of our family. And we'll talk a little bit about we want to talk a little bit about kind of a few things tonight, which is our experience of kind of moving into ministry. We want to talk briefly about what it means to be Jewish. We've talked a lot about being Jewish. Well, what is that? And even at dinner, I think someone was asking, well, what does it mean? Is it, are you born Jewish? What do you believe? And how this to kind of explain a little bit. Um, and then, um, and then talk a little bit about how our ministry kind of works. And our ministry is reaching Jewish people with the gospel. So we want to kind of give you a little bit of an orientation to that. But in terms of going into ministry, what do you think, Annette?
I know the
Yeah.
questions that.
Yeah, like for you, what were the questions when you were young and you were thinking about that?
So, I grew up in a church that was very evangelistic. I don't know if any of you know the Bridge in Fresno. It used to be called EV Free when I was growing up, and then they changed to a cooler name later on. So, but yeah, very evangelistic. So, every school break, they had some kind of like missions trip for the youth. So, went to Mexico every year and Indian reservations, and so that was a large part of it, was just how ministry oriented our church was. And then, when I was thinking about college and career and stuff, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. I knew that I loved music. I also was really interested in the Bible offerings at Biola. So those were the things that kind of drew me to Biola. And I wasn't directly thinking of ministry, but I wasn't closed to that idea. And Biola has like missions conferences, and so you meet a lot of people who are in ministry. But something that happened the very first day of school when I walked into the music building. In the lobby, there was an easel with a bulletin board on it, and on the bulletin board was a letter on Jews for Jesus letterhead. So it immediately caught my eye because it was right in front of my face, and it was a letter from Jews for Jesus from the LA branch director saying that they were looking for musicians for their local music team. And back in those days, every student had to do Christian service every semester. And that meant like a certain number of hours every month that you had to do some sort of service for the community or a nonprofit. And so that was what I ended up doing with Jews for Jesus, was serving with their local music team, going out and handing gospel tracts out on the weekends in Westwood Village and Santa Monica and different places around LA. So, and I think I just really connected. It was the first time that I'd been in any kind of a sizable Jewish community of believers. And it's such like a specialized community that I felt like, I have found my people. And so that was really meaningful to me. And they started to invest in me to help me kind of figure out who I was too. So I think that was a lot of what drew me. And I'd always had a heart for my Jewish people to know Jesus, but didn't know like how could I do that? The people in my family, besides the close in ones, none of them were believers and they didn't know how to relate to the Jewish community. So they really helped me to figure that out. So I think that was kind of my direction, how I ended up going that way. So, but as I mentioned earlier, when I was done with college, I served for a couple of years with a traveling music team that was part of Jews for Jesus. And when that was done, I was offered the opportunity to actually go and do missionary training. And I knew that if I did that, that was really like stepping into actually going into ministry. And I wasn't positive that I wanted to do that. So I went home for a semester and I just prayed a lot, kind of waited on the Lord. I did a few things too to kind of like see, is there anything for me back here in my hometown? Went out on a few dates. None of those materialized to be much. I auditioned for the local orchestra, but they weren't hiring violists at the time. That was my instrument, it was viola. And so, like nothing clearly was saying you should stay here, you should stay in your hometown. And so I was like, okay, let's go to New York City. So that's where Jews for Jesus was training all of their missionaries in those days. So I moved to New York City and I was trained there. So that's kind of the my trajectory towards going towards ministry. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so for me, I think going into ministry was I wasn't quite sure what to do career wise. I studied history in college, and I liked it. I thought I might teach, something along those lines. But I really loved the evangelism. I loved the telling people. I went on a couple of short term missions trips and really loved it, and I was seemed to be pretty good at it, and so I decided when it was offered to kind of come on staff, I decided to try it. People asked me, like, well, how did you know that you were called? At the beginning, I didn't know, but I did think, well, um, like I could be doing worse things in the world than, you know what I mean? And so I came on staff, and I think for me that sense of calling was something that developed over the first 3 years of being on staff. And so it took a while in the middle of it to really kind of get a sense of how that worked. I know some of you are wondering some of those questions of like, what does God want out of my life? And what I found was it was hard for me to determine that, maybe impossible, before I actually started doing it. And it was in the doing it that I really got the sense of how God was leading me. So, so so Jewish. Should we talk about that? Yeah?
Yeah.
Or is that a too strong of a break?
And are we doing tea later?
We're gonna do so tomorrow morning we do the grill, right?
So
Okay.
big
So
question.
part of what we wanted to do is like introduce ourselves to you before that, so you knew some things to ask about. Okay. So we're Jewish. So how do we understand Jewish, that word? When I think about it, there's three things. There's uh there's Jewish, which is like a cultural identity idea. there are very Jewish things. There's Jewish food, there's Jewish humor, there's, right, all of this kind of stuff. There are Jewish people. So this is like an ethnic definition. So you can be born Jewish. You're going to be born as a Jew, let's say. And then you can either be very Jewish or not very Jewish. Hmm. And there's Judaism, which is a religion. So all three of these things are kind of, as they work together, to sort of like define what it is to be Jewish. So that there are people who are born Jewish, who are born as Jews, who are complete atheists. There are people who are born as Jews, who are like very religious Orthodox Jews. Um, and so the the challenge, I think, sometimes when people talk about being Jewish is that it doesn't follow the same set of definitions as Christianity does. So when you say you're a Christian, it's primarily like a belief thing. Well, for Jewish people, it's not necessarily a belief thing. So when you think of a Jewish person that you identify as being Jewish today, who might you think of? Okay, so they're like a very religious family. Okay, good, good, good. Ben Shapiro, good. Okay, okay, all right. So she's Jewish. She's become a believer in Jesus. Okay, Adam Sandler, nice. Yes, I like that one. Okay, very good. Yeah, Howie Mandel. That's right. Yep. Jerry Seinfeld, right. If some of you were Seinfeld fans back in the day. Uh-huh. Barbara Streisand, right. All of you guys today strike me like all of you have these outgoing personalities that you like all probably did like musical theater in high school, right? So you all know Barbara Streisand. Okay, all right, good. Good. Okay. Yeah. So these are all identifiable Jewish people. Not all of them are religious. In fact, a lot of them are not religious at all. So being Jewish doesn't necessarily mean you are religious. So what are some definitions that you guys think of that are significant to being Jewish, like the ish part, the cultural part of being Jews? What do you think is important? Okay, holidays. Hanukkah being one of them. Right, holidays. Important. Education. Important. Right? Three options. A doctor, a lawyer, a failure. Those are your No, just kidding. Sorry. Sorry. Bad joke. Bad joke. Yeah. Dark humor. No, okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah. Kosher food. That's right. Kosher food. Not the tastiest, but your rabbis are happy when you're eating it. Okay. Yeah. Like no one ever said, let's go out to a kosher restaurant, right? Yeah. Okay. So, what else about being Jewish? Yeah. Yeah. Bar mitzvah, these sort of like the kind of life cycle events, and usually if you've ever been to one, they're usually pretty epic parties too. So, yeah. Shabbat. Okay, good. So these are all religious things. Good. What else? Anything? Yeah. Mindset, work ethic, right. Yeah, you're kind of working, especially families like we both came from immigrant families. So that's part of also like immigrant family experiences. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Uh-huh. Okay, so like your ethnicity is a big deal. Yeah. I think that's absolutely correct. And I know that for even for us, like we're interested when there's like so somebody sent me a Somebody sent me a note after the last election that said there were 4 Joshes elected as governors of states in America. And he was like, and most of them were Jewish. And so he was like, maybe you're in the running, or something like that. So like you're interested in when there's other Jewish people doing stuff. Like you have you're into baseball and you go, well, I know the Jewish player, right? It's usually not very many, but there's like one or two. Yeah. So, mhm. Yeah, good. Yep. Holidays. Israel. And over the last couple of years, the questions of Israel have been very tense. You've got a lot of Jewish people that are supportive of Israel. You've got a lot of Jewish people that are not supportive of Israel. So it's been a very interesting last 2 years since the war in Gaza. Um, but Israel is important. And part of the reason why Israel is important is that survival is important because for many Jewish people, there's a history of persecution. In Annette's family, in my family, we both have experiences of this. And so these cultural identity markers are important. Um, the religion is important. The ethnicity is important. So when we talk about Jewish, that we're Jews, we're talking about talking to Jewish people. It's really important that we kind of understand those things.
One other thought.
Yeah.
And one other thought is that unlike, well, I guess some countries have this too, but Israel also, you might say, I mean, Jewish people also, there's a nationality in the sense that, there's a Israel is the only country in the world that is a Jewish country, and it identifies itself that way. So that's kind of a unique thing too. I mean, there's if you're Italian, there's the motherland, right, of Italy, or if you're, whatever your descendants, they came from a country where it was mostly Italian, or it was mostly Mexican, or it was mostly Japanese, or whatever. I'm meeting people from all these different places in the world. So Jewish people have that too now, especially since Israel exists again. But even when Israel didn't exist, which was the last 2,000 years approximately, there was always this hope that one day Israel would exist again and that our people could all regather in Israel. That was always a hope. In fact, tomorrow night when we'll celebrate Passover, the last thing you say at the end of the Passover Seder celebration is next year in Jerusalem, because that was always a hope throughout the centuries for our people that when the Messiah came, he would gather us back to the land. So, and that's what we call it. We call it Haaretz, or the land. We just call it the land. We don't call it really the Holy Land. That's not really a thing.
Christians call it the
Christians call it the Holy Land. Catholics call it the Holy Land. We just call it the land.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. So let me ask you just one quick question. How long does this go till? What time? 8, maybe, or something. Okay. Doesn't matter. All right. Okay. You live here, so you're not going anywhere. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Hmm. So So one of the things that I want to talk to you about is because we're going to talk a little bit this week about Jewish holidays. We're going to do a Passover Seder. We're going to talk about evangelism, but I want to talk about something that is a word in ministry and missions that maybe you've heard, and the word is contextualization. Have you ever heard that word contextualization? What does that word mean? Okay, close. That's certainly what understanding the Bible in terms of its context is, which is really important for sure. Contextualization is something a little bit different. Aha. Okay, good. So the idea is when you're contextualizing something, you're taking something and bringing it into a new context. Right? You are contextualizing something. Did you have an idea there? Bringing it into another context. Yeah. Okay. So maybe the easiest way to understand this is we are talking when we talk about the Bible, we're talking about a message that was written in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek, but we're all speaking English. So we are contextualizing into our world because we speak English. That makes sense, right? So if I was going to go to a church that was speaking Spanish, I would speak Spanish. We're going to go to a church in Japan, we would be in Japanese, you know. And what we believe about the gospel is that it makes sense in these different languages also. You don't have to study the Bible in Hebrew or Greek to really understand what it says. You can study it in English and you can actually hear God and God can speak to you. We believe that? Yeah. Okay, good. Imagine that culture is also a language. So you're wearing a shirt that says football. Okay. I don't know if you play football or not, or you like football. Okay. So if I want to kind of think about someone who is into football, we would contextualize the gospel or something into an area or into a person's life that speaks football. Here's an example. So I had a friend who were going to start a church, and they were in Tennessee. They were not from Tennessee, but they were living in Tennessee, or sorry, they were living in Texas. And they said we're going to start a Friday night service. And everybody said, Friday night is the worst time to start something. And they said, what do you mean? It's the best time. Like, they don't have homework. The kids don't have homework. And gave them all these reasons. And the people around them said, you don't understand. You're in Texas. And on Friday nights, people go to football games. That's what they do here. So if you want to have a service, nobody is going to come. That's an example of contextualization. And so our our church, okay, so we go to a church that's mostly Chinese. So it's about 80, 90%. Well, it's 80, 90% Asian, but the majority are Chinese. There's a few Korean families, a couple of Indonesian families. It's mostly an Asian church. We live in LA. Friday night is when we do all of the services for like high school kids and K through 12. And the reason why we do Fridays and not Wednesdays, as some churches like to do is because as Asian families, they're really keyed into like studying, right? So you're not going to do something on a school night for a family that is kind of really keyed into academics. So Friday works. And nobody plays football. Yeah. But they all like basketball. Yeah. Okay. Um, so contextualization. So this is really important. It's an important part of what we do. It's important part of what our ministry is about. This picture is an example of some things that we did. Um, Up there, this is a guy on the street opening the Bible, talking with someone. This is a like a march. We did a march with signs that said "Jews for Jesus" and all of this kind of stuff. We're handing out tracts. This is like in the late 70s, early 80s. The world was kind of more of an activist oriented world. This was contextualizing to Jewish people that were like activist oriented.
And that one,
That
I was gonna say,
oh,
and the top
uh,
corner one there, where the guy is wearing I don't know if you could see it, but the top left-hand corner, he's wearing a shirt that says Yeshua, and Yeshua is the Jewish way to say Jesus. And we had a whole advertising campaign, in newspapers. In those days, people read newspapers. And so and that was a big contextualizing outreach because a lot of Jewish people didn't even know that Jesus was not his name, Yeshua was his name. A lot of Christians didn't even know Jesus was Jewish. And so that was another way to reach out in a contextualizing way.
So now the tech contextualization is this picture. So instead of handing out tracts, what we were handing out was really good iced coffee.
What it says on
And it says brews for Jesus, right? So we're sort of playing with our own name a little bit, right?
Sometimes we hand out juice
Yeah,
for
yeah.
Jesus.
Well, yeah. So and then up here, So Be It is a channel that we have on YouTube and other kind of social media platforms. And so that's an example of contextualization. So a lot of the ministry work that we're doing all sort of revolves around this contextualization idea. And it's really important. It's a big part of what we do. It's something that you see happening a lot. So, um can I open the Bible and just share a few verses with you, and you can see a little bit about how this works in Scripture? All right, open to the book of John, chapter 10, verse uh, verse 20, verse 22. And what you're going to see is that when you under if you think about how contextualization works, is that contextualization helps you see all the things that are going on around a person or a group of people or an environment that helps you read what's happening. Okay. Somebody want to read it? 22 verse or 10, John 10 22 through 24. Just three verses. Okay. Good. All right. So there's a setting in this passage, okay? It's the Feast of Dedication. Any idea what we call that today? You mentioned it. Hanukkah. That's the holiday of Hanukkah. Yeah. Only time it's ever mentioned in the Bible is here in John chapter 10. Anybody know anything about the holiday of Hanukkah? Candles, okay? Yes. Presents, right? Like the Jewish Christmas kind of, right? Yeah, okay. 13 days, close. It's like almost a week, right? So it's 8 days. Yep. 8 days? Yes. Okay, there's this miracle of this is the candle thing. And so there's oil that lasts for 8 days that should have lasted 1 day, okay? That's what you're going to say? All right.
Hint,
Oh,
called the
it,
Feast of Dedication.
uh,
Do you know why it's called that?
okay, what's being dedicated? Themselves and a place, the temple. Okay, so here's what's happening. This is in between, the setting is in between the end of the Old Testament and the beginning of the New. The Greeks are on the scene, and the Greeks took over Israel and took over the temple, and they set up a big statue of the emperor, and they said, you have to bow down and worship this emperor and call the emperor God. Jewish people in Egypt or in Israel decided not to do that. The Greeks were not so kind of cool with that. And they said, well, we are going to force you. And as a way of humiliating you, we're actually going to take your place of worship and desecrate it. So they went to the temple in Jerusalem. They took a pig, maybe the most non kosher food you can have, sacrificed a pig on the altar in Jerusalem, and took the blood of the pig and splattered it all over the inside of the temple, desecrated it. There was a group of fighters, the Maccabees, that fought against the Greeks and won. And the guy who led this fight was Judah the Maccabee. And they rededicated the temple. And that's why it's called the holiday of dedication. So, and Hanukkah in Hebrew means dedication. So that's kind of what's going on. That's the setting here. All right. What's next? They're in Jerusalem. It's winter, which makes sense, right? That's kind of Hanukkah happens usually late November, December, something like that. Jesus is walking at the temple, the place that was dedicated. Mm. And so now the Jewish people, the Jews surround him. Okay, just really quick. In the Gospel of John, when you see the Jews, you see that a lot. It's usually referring to either the Jewish leaders or the Jewish people. They were all Jews. Jesus was Jewish, the disciples were Jewish, the Jews were Jewish. So it's just kind of a funny way of describing. So the Jews surrounded him and asked, "How long are you going to keep us in suspense? If you are the Christ or the Messiah, tell us plainly." Why were they so eager to have Jesus reveal himself as the Messiah? Okay, that would maybe some of them had that in mind, but why now? Why are they so kinda amped up right now? Close. Alright, we're getting there. Good. We're getting there. Okay, yeah. Because he was gonna save them from Romans just like the other guy saved them from the Greeks. So, they thought the Messiah was gonna be like the Maccabee. They thought there was gonna be another Hanukkah. That's what they were after. Okay? So now Jesus then kind of responds and has this interesting conversation with them. And we're not going to read anymore. I'm going to stop here because what I want to say is that when you understand what's going on behind this story, it really helps you understand why Jesus says the things that he's saying, how Jesus responds, what the other people are thinking. This is all in the Bible, but the same kind of thing happens today. So you will see this when you come to Los Angeles, but we have a coffee shop. How do people in their 20s relate to each other and they relate to the world? Many of them do that through really good coffee. Yeah, right, amen. Yeah, so there you go. So, and there is something that happens in in a coffee shop or an environment where really good coffee is being served. It it's almost hard to explain exactly what happens, but it's intentional. It's a thing, right? And so this is part of our group that's down at the coffee shop, and here's the outside and inside of the coffee shop. The coffee shop is a contextualized ministry to a particular group of people. And there's something that happens when we kind of create an environment where there's coffee, we have art, there's community, and it reaches out and into a community that is pretty significant. And in the same way that maybe um, back 20, 30, 40 years ago, it was activism. Today, it might be community and coffee. In 20, 30, 40 years, it will probably be something different. I don't know what it'll be, but my guess is that it will be different. So when because we're going to talk a bit about ministry while we're here and evangelism and outreach. This concept of contextualization is going to be a big theme that we're going to kind of hit over and over while we're here. So,
We're going to talk tonight about having in a Jewish context.
we can, but we'll do that throughout the week as well. So,
Right. Maybe.
I wanted to see if there was any questions. Yeah. So, you guys, any thoughts or questions? Yeah.
When does what is the word
Contextualization.
yes, when does that become unhealthy? When preaching
Oh,
the gospel or
yeah. Good question. We sometimes call that over contextualization. Okay. So let's say it's not coffee, but everybody is like doing drugs. And you're like, to reach them, I need to do that too. Because they really like that. And it's like creating this really good vibe. And everybody's kind of like casual with each other. And so we're not going to open a coffee shop, but we're probably going to open like a dispensary. I don't know if a dispensary style ministry is exactly the way to go. You know what I mean? Um, you could sorry, did I say something wrong? Jesus and weed. Yeah. So like that might be like going a little beyond over contextualization.
Well, it's like casual, or it's something that you would like. What's an example, an illustration you would give, and maybe you wouldn't think is like people wouldn't consider so unhealthy, or
Yeah. So this is oh yeah.
I was gonna
Get in the mud.
I was just thinking of one that, you guys might not remember this as much because you're younger, but for our generation, there was a huge shift with music in churches and wanting to have like seeker sensitive churches. And so let's get rid of all the hymns and let's do music that everybody is familiar with in like the, rock and pop and everything. And so throw out all of that, bring in this and try to make the whole experience that you're having will make you comfortable and nothing that's uncomfortable. Maybe even set up cafe tables, let people get coffee drinks and sit and have a croissant and coffee while the worship service is happening. We've actually gone to a church that does that as well. And you have to ask yourself, where in there is where in there is it going too far where you're trying to make people so comfortable that you're not challenging them at all to step out from their usual everyday comfort to do something that's a little uncomfortable because maybe it's worth it because they're going to discover God. You're going to discover truths about God.
Mhm.
So I think churches have to be really careful like how far they go, trying to make people comfortable that way. So that's an example I can pick of. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So right. So uh evangelism and missions is not like the marketing team for Jesus. That's not what we're doing. Contextualization is not the same as marketing. We're not looking for a pragmatic kind of just how many likes can I get on this, kind of video or whatever it is. So we're actually taking a message and we're contextualizing that message into a community. So what you guys are studying in your theology classes, that's the message. And the better you know the message, and the better you then are at listening to the world around you, then what you can do is you can take what you know, which is true, and then you can contextualize it into other communities. Mm. But there are boundaries. So, yep. Yeah. So the first step of the coffee shop, do you want to answer that question? Yeah, maybe you should.
yeah, because I work actually,
She's
more with
part of it.
he's more of our international kind of overseeing our international work, but I work with our local Los Angeles work. And so the coffee shop is actually right across the street from UCLA. And so as we were praying about what to do with this fantastic space that we owned, rather than just having it being a boring office space, we thought, okay, well, what would students want? And this is one of the things they love is a space where they can just come feel welcome and, be able to study, have great coffee. We do a by donation system. And so pay what you wish, which students love, because some of them can't afford much. So that's part of what, we do. It's a draw for them. And actually, the first cup is free. The first drink is free. And so when people come in and we say, "Is this your first time here?" And they say, "Yes." And we say, "Well, your first drink is free." And that's because we're a nonprofit owned and operated by a group called Jews for Jesus. And then we hand them a little card that says Jews for what on one side. And then on the back side, it has a little explanation of who we are. And so that's like a little opportunity just to throw out, that name for them. Our coffee shop's actually called Upside Down. And sometimes people were like, well, where did that name come from? And our branch director, he chose the name because for three reasons. One, there's a popular Israeli drink called cafe hafuch, which is like a cappuccino, but it's upside down because you pour the ingredients in a different order. So we have that on the menu, cafe hafuch, cafe upside down. But then secondly, in the book of Acts, they talk about that the disciples were these men who turned the world upside down, talking about the gospel. And then the third thing is that Jews for Jesus, that kind of sounds upside down, doesn't it? It sounds like that, but it actually isn't. So that's kind of the concept that this, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to say
So
about it?
what that does
Mhm.
is what we do is we create trust and create an environment of inclusion. That's where we start.
No.
Inclusion. We want you here.
Mhm.
Not engagement. Yeah. I-
Yeah.
Inclusion is like you're welcome.
Yeah.
Everybody's welcome.
Everybody's welcome. Yeah.
Yeah. So
But then
that's like the first level.
but it's also inclusion subtly for Jewish people because we have cafe hafuch on the menu, and we have yeah, up on the menu board. There's a shelf right below it. It's got three little wooden baby blocks, but they're Hebrew, and they have the word hafuch in Hebrew. So if you're Jewish and you come in, there's these little things here and there that let you know that this is a Jewish space. So and then you have a question? Yeah. I'll just give a little bit more explanation, then we can answer your question. So, and then we offer things that build community in the space, such as watercolor workshops, challah braiding workshops. So challah is the traditional Jewish egg bread that's braided, that we eat on Friday nights. So we have that. We do art shows because the Jewish community on the West Side is very arts oriented. So we actually invite Israeli artists, Jewish artists, UCLA students to submit their art. And we have different art shows on religious themes or spiritual themes.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
So this is level 2. So what we just explained.
What would you call that?
Okay.
Like,
So this is where the first is welcome. This one is engagement.
yeah.
Okay.
And we're engaging on different levels.
Yeah.
So some of the activities are very low entry, like braiding challah. But then the art shows, they do have a spiritual theme, and we look for opportunities to talk to the people who come and build relationships with the artists. Then we have another level up, which would be our Shabbat, our Sabbath dinners, which we have once a month. And with those, that's an actual Jewish observance. So we say the traditional blessings, and we do a little bit of teaching from the Torah, from the first five
We have a
books.
little short Bible lesson,
Mhm.
5-10 minutes.
Yeah, so
Something like
that's
that.
and then from there, a deeper level. Oh,
So
go ahead.
that's level 3. Well, I knew you were gonna have to pick. Okay, so level 3. So level 2 is engagement. Level 3 is what would you call it? Teaching? Yeah, sure, teaching. Level 3 is teaching. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say deeper engagement, but teaching's good. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
And then from there, as we build the trust with individuals and they come more and more often and they feel more comfortable with us and they realize we're not bizarre, we're not weird because their mother told them we're a cult when they were growing up, the Jewish people. Anyway,
Okay, fam.
yes, like his aunt used to. Yeah. So they realize, oh, they like really good coffee. They make good food for Shabbat. They seem pretty normal. We build a relationship, we build trust. And hopefully, with some of those people, then we can start to individually connect with them, meet with them for one on one Bible studies, or invite them to our online Bible studies with, group Bible studies and get more directly into the word with them. So,
And that's level 4. Right. So what's level 4? It's like discipleship.
Yeah.
So trust is where it starts. But you're right. That also is trust building. You're right. But right, the fourth level is kind of where we get to discipleship. And this is where we're talking the most explicitly about the Bible, about Jesus, about things. People are coming to faith. People are growing in their faith. People are getting involved in congregations and churches. People are getting baptized, things like that. As you would imagine, the the number of people that come in for a cup of coffee is much bigger, and then it gets smaller and smaller, and then it's just a few at the discipleship level. But that's how the coffee shop works. There is a
No, and we're planting seeds too, I would say. Because we have many engagements with people and they'll ask us stuff like, "What is Juice for Jesus?" And we'll have a 5 or 10 minute conversation, and maybe they won't want to speak to us again about it, but we've planted a seed. And as we know in the scriptures, that's an important thing too. And sometimes a lot of seeds have to be planted before, faith blooms for somebody. So,
so there's a fifth level, and this is what's been happening in Israel. So we have 3 coffee shops that we run in Israel, and 2 of them have spawned congregations. So they went from all those steps, step 4, which was discipleship, and from the next step is actually congregation. And we're in the middle. Oh, sorry. You had your hand up a long time. Sorry.
How do you financially see it with
Mm, good.
yeah, well, it is more possible for us to do that because we already own the building. So that helps a lot. Another thing is that actually people are a lot of them are surprisingly generous. They'll pay what they're used to paying anyway, like $5, $7 for a drink or something like that. Some students I find they're really cheap and they always pay a buck, you know? But actually we are kind of reworking the system. We may need to switch it because we are finding it's getting a little bit challenging to meet our expenses because mostly it's the barista salaries that is kind of a lot. So we're thinking of adjusting it and making it similar to what our New York City cafe does, which is have very good prices compared to the rest of the neighborhood, but, have a suggested price that's yeah, so that might be happening fairly soon, so
So she's more involved in it now. I was more involved when it started. But what we tried to imagine was that we wanted to cover the costs of baristas, the costs of all of the coffee and the cups and, the stuff. Um, but other than that, then Juice for Jesus kind of pays for the building, the space, and the also whatever like ministry missionary staff might be there, who are not baristas, by the way. We're allowed to take orders but not make coffee. so so um but so far what's happened on the business side is that actually we found that until fairly recently, I guess, it's actually worked. And somebody gives $1, but somebody else gives 20.
yeah.
So, yeah, it's a good question. I didn't think it would work. Um, and I saw a coffee shop in Portland, Oregon do this. And I was living in New York City. I thought this is the stupidest idea in the world, right? But it worked. And what it did, because what we're saying is that you're not paying for a cup of coffee, you're actually giving a donation because it's pay by donation. People felt a stronger sense of community rather than just like going to Starbucks and paying 5, 7, $8 for a cup of coffee. Mhm.
oh, you can go to tonight, well, to bar since there's low of Zucker. But I want to learn more about your guys' like upbringing with this ministry, like what that looked like, coming together with the people you came together with. Maybe even more if you guys can talk about like the creative way of thinking, the coming about this ministry, like the creative aspect, because you're mentioning a lot of creative aspects of this ministry. that you got going. And so I just love to learn more about the creative aspect.
Cool. We're here all week.
And even if we don't get it answered in one of the sessions, we're here for every meal.
We're here on all the meals.
So, yes.
Just grab us.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So this one was called Tabor Space. Are you from Portland? Corvallis. Okay. So it's actually connected to a church in a neighborhood in Portland called Mount Tabor, which is like northeast Portland, kind of near Hawthorne. It's that area. Yeah. Uh, yeah. It's a pretty cool coffee shop. There's another, what's the Henson one? What's that one called?
I don't remember.
Inside Cafe.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but Portland, coffee is like a religion.
When she goes, she's got to tell them that juice for Jesus.
Ah.
And if you want, you can.
The at the Tabor space, they won't care. Right?
Probably be like,
No, they would care at Eastside Coffee because that church actually supports us. We used to be members there. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. So there was a question back here. Oh, no, believe
well,
with the blue cap. No.
that's kind of where we are. So what we've got going this week is tomorrow tomorrow we've got the grill that you do with us, right? Okay, so that's on you. You have to figure out what you're going to say to us. And then tomorrow night we're going to do a Passover Seder. So Passover Seder, we will explain what it is. It's going to be in there. It's a whole meal. It's all kinds of interesting stuff. And if you've never done one, it's a lot of fun. And if you've done one, you know how much fun it is. And so we'll do that tomorrow. Wednesday, we're actually going to do a session in the afternoon um, on all the Jewish festivals. So these are the biblical feasts. If you want to read, it's in the book of Leviticus. There's 7 biblical feasts. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the ones like Hanukkah and some of the more modern ones as well. That's okay. Tuesday, Wednesday morning, Wednesday, and then Wednesday evening. I can't remember what we're doing. Wednesday evening we're going to do a little bit more of kind of what we talked about tonight, which is giving you a little bit of some lesson on how to learn culture and how to begin to enter into contextualization. And then we have Friday, right, or Thursday morning, right, is the last one, and then we'll do a little bit more kind of evangelistic prep for you guys. We might switch it up a little bit depending on how the conversations go as well. But that's our plan for the week, and we're here, and we love coming up. This is our 3rd or 4th year, Dallas. 4th year. So we love coming up, and we love the sessions, but we also love just kind of being with you guys. So being here and being at the meals and just being around, we are here for you.